Atkin had been preparing for this day for the last month of his planet's time. In Earth time, that was similar in length, only with about an extra week added on. That was one of the many little facts the ambassador had learned about humanity and their home planet since their explorers first found their home. The squishy, fuzzy, adorable little. He flicked his antenna together, creating an effect like slapping yourself in the face to clear away an unwanted thought. This was a serious situation, and he couldn't let himself get swept up in the hysteria that had followed the reveal of the humans and how they look. Were they some of the cutest things to ever grace the galaxy? Sure, but it was still rude to treat a sapient being the same way you might a house pet. The pair that had shown up on his planet had made that very clear. To counteract his natural urges to swoon over the adorable primates, he had spent most of the last month training himself to ignore his cuteness response. He had watched the interview with the explorers dozens of times, focusing on absorbing what they said and not on how soft their bodies looked. Another useful training material was the picture that Council Mother Silna took with the human breeder known as Daniel with her child atop his head. Atkin would stare at that picture for hours until he got bored, and then kept staring at it so that way he would partially associate the delightful features of the humans with boredom. This was all done in an effort to prepare himself for setting foot on the human home world, where he would undoubtedly be surrounded by the endearing humans. Just thinking about seeing dozens if not hundreds of those delightfully fleshy and fuzzy faces made him want to shriek with joy and dive right into the cuddle pile and hug every one of. His antenna slapped together twice, making him cringe from the sting he subjected himself to. Focus, Atkin. You were chosen for this mission because you exhibited the most self-control out of your peer group. Sure, it had been several months since first contact, but even so the hype around the humans had not died down in the slightest. There were already toy manufacturers creating plushy humans and selling them to great success. He may have bought one. Atkin clacked his mandibles with determination as he focused on the task at hand. The journey to the human homeworld took 2 weeks of traveling to reach, and that's just traveling in as close to a straight line as they could with no distractions. That certainly gave him time to prepare himself even more, but it was also near torturous after the first week. There was very little to do, and despite himself, he was feeling excitement start to build beneath his carapace the closer they got. They were now a matter of hours away from Earth. Atkin had checked and double-checked his equipment and diplomatic materials he had brought along with them. Now he was just pacing back and forth, legs skittering across the metal floor of the ship as he waited for the crew to bring him closer to their destination. The last few hours felt almost like an eternity, but eventually the intercom in his room buzzed with a notification from the cockpit. He rushed over and eagerly accepted the call as he heard the voice of his pilot chittering through the speaker. Diplomat Atkin, we have entered human-controlled space and are requesting permission to land. Please take your seat and secure yourself for atmospheric entry. There was an underlying hum in the pilot's voice that betrayed the fact that they were excited too, even if they weren't likely to interact with many humans during their stay here. Understood. Thank you for your hard work. I'll seat myself immediately. After that confirmation, Atkin moved to his seat, a rounded, padded chair on the floor. Several straps were wrapped around his carapace that were anchored to the floor and the wall behind him. It would keep him secure and from being tossed around too much, even in the event of a crash landing. About half an hour later, Atkin felt the rumble of the ship entering the outer atmosphere of the planet. The entire vessel shook and jostled as the turbulence increased by the second. He had only very rarely gone into space before this mission, and entering the atmosphere was always the most stressful part for him as he held onto the straps tightly. Finally, the ship stopped shaking as they leveled out and started to fly in atmosphere toward the landing zone. This was it. In just a few minutes, he would be stepping outside to be greeted by humanity. His antennae twitched with anticipation for the remainder of the ride until, at last, he felt the ship start to slow down and a gentle thud rock the vessel. Atkin quickly unstrapped himself and collected his communication devices, both his wrist one and the small screen that he could use to bring up pictures and other relevant information. While both sides had been working toward deciphering the spoken language of the other, there were just so many differences in how they each talked as a species that it was taking a significant amount of time. That hardly mattered, though, because Atkin was simply happy to have the opportunity to be in their presence and discuss a future between their two species. He stood at the ramp that would soon drop and allow him to see the human world for the first time. Giving himself another once-over, he confirmed his shell was polished to a shine, his antennae were straight, and his posture was unfurled. This would be a moment that will go down in history, and he felt his mandibles clack with a giddy joy at that thought. The ramp started to drop, letting in a wave of temperate air that rushed into the cooled interior of the ship. With measured steps, Atkin descended the gentle slope and into the mid-morning light of this planet's star. He emerged into a wide-open area made largely of concrete with large hangars flanking it on two sides. It was obviously a landing strip, and while foreign in design, he could recognize the military efficiency about it. That was of little consequence, though, as he immediately set his sights upon the group of about a dozen humans waiting a fair distance away from where the ship had landed. They were all wearing those bizarre, yet adorable, coverings he had seen on the explorers, only these weren't as bright. They were all black and looked quite similar in design. The only variation was seen in the brood mothers, or rather, females who had clothes with more variety in their design, but were still dark in color. He wondered if they were doing that for his benefit, to look more like his carapace. He thought it was cute that they would do that for him, and he felt his mandibles clack with amusements before he quickly stilled them. Have to be professional now. People, not pets. You saw how the first two reacted. Do not duck this up. Your planet will disown you if you do. He could only imagine the angry mobs that would be after his carapace if he somehow estranged the whole of humanity during this trip. That thoughts alone made him reaffirm his stance on being a model example of Ursulkind. Once he was close enough, one of the male humans stepped forward and gave him a slight bow in greeting. Atkin returned the gesture, curling himself up halfway to show non-aggression while still being open to speaking. To curl up all the way would be seen as too defensive and unwilling to budge on a situation, a tactic commonly used by unruly spawn and the particularly immature. Sure, it was also a defensive measure in the event of something dangerous happening, but this was a social gathering and not a fight, and context was important. After the initial greeting was finished and they both righted themselves, the human began to tap away on a portable screen. Atkin watched their smooth and dexterous fingers move quickly and accurately, though he imagined it was somewhat limiting to have only 2 arms instead of his more numerous 4. A few moments later, a message appeared on his wrist device. Greetings, Ambassador Atkin. My name is Noah Bridger and I, along with the rest of my colleagues, extend to you a warm welcome to our planet. We hope that our meeting here today will be the catalyst for future interaction and peaceful contact. Atkin clacked his mandibles in a happy way as he typed a reply. I feel great joy at your welcome and am proud to be standing here this day. My hope is that both of our species grow closer with this visit and that deep friendships be allowed to form. He also hoped that he might become close enough to a human that they would allow him to have physical interactions with them. That desire was kept to himself, though, and he studied the human's reaction to his declaration of friendly intentions. The group of humans looked between themselves, sharing expressions that were difficult for him to read. A few of them shifted their stances a little. He didn't know human body language all that well, but even though they were soft and flexible, a few looked quite stiff in posture, especially one female with long brown fur on her head who had been staring openly. Before he could really start to wonder why that was, Noah sent him another message. We are glad to hear that you are excited, and we ourselves are eager to begin speaking with the first ever aliens to be discovered in this vast universe. We have prepared a vehicle that will take us to the meeting hall where you may speak with many of our world's leaders, and the people beyond who will be listening in. The vehicle was designed with your body type in mind using data provided by your government and the First Contact team. News of your arrival has been looked forward to by many who are eager to see another species capable of advanced thought like our own, and we wish to make the process as comfortable as possible for everyone involved. Atkin was touched that they went through the effort of creating a vehicle just for his visit. You honor me with such thought and consideration. I share the sentiment of the many people of your planet and am eager to speak with you all, both now in an official capacity and possibly in a more personal one should the future be kind. He applauded himself for staying professional even though a bit of his true desires leaked out. In that case, Shall we begin traveling to the meeting location? I'm certain that no one would wish to delay this any longer than need be. Noah turned and gestured to a large car that was behind the group. It was a boxy design that was completely foreign to Atkins' sensibilities. The look of it was quite refreshing, in a way, and further drove home the fact that he was on an alien world. I agree. Let us proceed at once. The anticipation returned to him once more as he followed the group of humans toward their convoy of vehicles. Noah opened the door for him, and it slid outward and to the side, allowing plenty of space to enter. Considering the size of the door and vehicle itself, and comparing it to the others that were in the convoy, it was clearly made larger so his could fit his body into it without difficulty. As he skittered through the open door, he saw a rounded seat with strap designs similar to what could be found in the ship he took here. There were 2 other seats in the back with a much more human-friendly design. After Atkin was situated and secure, 2 of the humans clambered into the car behind him, Noah, and another female with light yellow hair that he had not had the pleasure of being personally introduced to. Just then, the female's covering seemed to tangle up her legs a bit, and she stumbled as she tried to join her companion in the back seat. Atkin reacted without thinking and reached out, catching her with both his right arms as he held fast to her shoulders. Warm, soft. His mind was lost for a moment as his senses were consumed by the squishy and yielding texture of her skin. He really wanted to pet her head fur and gently hug her body. If the space had allowed for it, he might have curled up around her so he could be even closer, but as it was, he was able to come back to his senses when he slapped his antennae together again. He helped the female to regain her balance, and with some disappointment, broke contact. The female acted strangely after he let go of her, and he noticed that she had even changed color, becoming slightly lighter in tone. I didn't know humans could do that. Atkin marveled at the change and wondered what it meant. She stuttered out a few words in her language before retreating to her seat with as much haste as she could given the environment they were in. After that brief distraction, they were all seated and ready to finally get on the road. The car started to move as the convey set off. It was time for Atkin to finally meet with the leaders of humanity and address the many people of this world. They drove for a while, approximately 20 minutes. The landing zone they set up for him was apparently quite far from the main city. Perhaps that was just for security, or to prevent too many civilians from swarming around. It was a good hypothesis. He knew that if the humans who visited had landed anywhere else other than the highly secure council building, they probably wouldn't have been able to move more than a few inches from all the Ursal who would swarm them, hoping to get a look or even touch the adorable aliens. His thoughts were interrupted as he looked out the window and saw towering buildings that were getting larger the closer they got. It seemed the boxy design wasn't just for vehicles as the straight, angular corners of these buildings stretched high into the sky. Some of them looked squat and made out of more primitive material like brick and mortar. Even so, they were a pleasant aesthetic and helped to break up the monotony of the large glass and steel rectangles, some of which were nearly tall enough to be in the clouds. There were paths that bridged between the buildings higher up, creating multi-layered walkways that connected the whole city together. Atkin also saw more humans. There weren't many on the streets they drove down, but there appeared to be several at every intersection, blocking it off to give them an unimpeded path to travel down. They seemed to be law enforcement of some kind, and he tried not to consider the little bright vests and belts stocked full of tools to be adorable. He had to remember that he shouldn't demean or insult them in such a way as he calmed himself. Despite his efforts, he found that increasingly difficult as more and more humans began to line the streets the closer they got to their destination. There's so many. He expected to see a lot of humans on this trip, attempted to prepare for it even. But being here in the middle of this army of people who all seemed to want to see him was proving to be too much for his senses. Atkin wanted to stop the car and dive into the crowd, drowning in the sea of squishy, fuzzy bliss. It was only through sheer force of will that he was able to remain calm and not budge an inch as he sat still in his seat. The convoy eventually arrived at the government building, parking out front of the walkway leading up and inside. Many flags were flown from the front of the building, each with its own unique design to symbolize the group it represented. The Ursal weren't completely united, but even so there were many more flags here than there would be on Atkin's planet. There was also the largest concentration of humans around here, including those who were from the media as cameras were pointed in the direction of his vehicle. The crowd was being held back by metal barricades and law enforcement who made sure no one did anything inappropriate. Atkin unbuckled himself just as his door was opened for him by one of the security personnel outside. He stepped out of the car and was met by a plethora of gasps as the crowd saw him before the clicking of cameras started. His gaze wandered the crowd around him as he studied the various humans with interest, just as they were with him. There was active conversation happening all around him, though he didn't understand any of it. Perhaps they were talking to him or about him. He could not tell as there were so many voices. Some looked quite energetic as they discussed with their fellows, while others were more restrained. Just then he caught sight of something that made all his higher brain functions cease. Is that an infant human? Atkin could hardly believe his eyes as his antennae twitched with pure delight as endorphins flooded his systems. The young one in question was currently being held close to the body of their mother, lazily sucking on their fingers as their large, curious eyes wandered aimlessly to whatever caught their interest. By the first mother, I thought normal humans were cute. I can practically feel my heart melting just looking at that squishy little one. Oh my, their little fuzzy head. Yeah. While staring at the infant, lost in a bout of cuteness overload, the mother suddenly shielded her baby's face and turned away from him, trying to push her way deeper into the crowd. Atkin felt something almost akin to panic as he saw the source of all these warm feelings in his heart getting further away. No, wait. Please come back. At least let me pet their fuzzy little head. I promise I'll be super gentle. Before his thoughts could become action, he felt a hand rest on one of his arms which managed to snap him back to reality. Noah had noticed his lack of movement and began to type a message on his device. Are you all right, Atkin? I apologize if this is a little overwhelming, but we wanted the public to at least be able to see you with their own eyes. It's a momentous occasion, something that we as humans have been dreaming of for centuries. I hope you can understand. Atkin felt a bit of relief that Noah had saved him from creating a scene and hadn't caught on to what he was thinking. He took in a breath before typing out a reply. I understand. We Ursula have also been hoping to one day meet another intelligent life out there. I was simply a little surprised that there were so many who wished to be here in person. Indeed, even standing here alongside you feels quite surreal. Still, best not to keep everyone waiting. Shall we proceed? Noah made a gesture with his hand toward the building. Yes, let us move on. He didn't want to risk any more temptation by remaining in this crowd. Allowing Noah to lead him down the path and through the crowd of humans, most of which were media who were taking numerous pictures as he went. When they passed the security barrier surrounding the building, the crowd thinned drastically, which helped Atkin regulate his rampant desire to snuggle with the humans as he once more entered a more professional mindset. The automated doors to the building opened as soon as they got close, and other than a few security officers standing inside, there was no one left to distract them from their official goal. Atkin finally had another emotion to focus on as he felt trepidation at meeting with so many important humans and nervousness as he couldn't afford to fail in opening the two worlds to one another. His mandibles clacked together, and his antennae sat straight on his head as he strode forth with resolve. The halls of the humans' government building were sleek and clean. Atkin marveled at the differences in architecture, though felt a little strange walking inside such angular walls. Still, the construction, the decorations, the art pieces on display, all of it was magnificent to his eyes as he absorbed every aspect of humanity that he could. He particularly liked the portraits of what must have been important people, elders by the looks of things. They get so wrinkly when they're old. It was amusing and endearing to see such drastic physical changes that they go through. Older Ursula simply lose coloration in their carapace as it becomes more gray than black. Another point toward humanity being amazingly adorable. Atkin flicked his antennae together. He had been doing that a lot ever since he exited his ship, and it was frankly starting to make him feel dizzy. In mere moments, he would be meeting with many of the leaders of humanity, and he could not afford to have his thoughts wander in such directions. Noah led him through the hallways until they entered what was obviously a back room and not for the general public, as it lacked any decoration and even had power lines, buttons, and switches on one of the walls. There was another door at the far end of the room, and a few seats pushed up against the wall, one of them of distinct Ursal design. A screen was mounted in the top corner of the room, but not currently broadcasting anything. Noah stopped in front of him and began to explain the procedures for meeting with their representatives as he typed out a long message. All right, let me briefly explain what will happen. Our leaders and the media are assembled in the next room, currently getting situated and doing last checks before the broadcast begins. I will be the introductory speaker that will talk with the media and the people of the world to announce the purpose of this meeting and some general information to make sure everyone is on the same page. After sufficiently explained everything, you will be invited on stage to give your address and speak with the various leaders of our world. You can watch this unfold live on the screen up there once the cameras turn on, and an assistant will be ready to show you onto the platform. Do you understand? Atkin went over the information once more before clacking his mandibles together and replying to Noah. Yes, I understand. Thank you for your help, and I shall wait for my summons. He moved to the seat that was obviously placed there for him and settled in. Noah gave one more nod of his head in acknowledgement before leaving. Now alone, Atkin felt clarity and disappointment war within his mind. He did not wish to be without human companionship even for just a little while, but he still used the time he had to organize the talking point that his government wished to go over with humanity's leaders. Scrolling through his device as he read and reread the various documents he had been given, his focus was interrupted when the screen in the corner of the room suddenly came to life. Redirecting his gaze to the monitor, he watched as Noah strode up to a podium, one that Atkin figured he would be standing at soon enough. Words scrolled along the bottom that he couldn't read, and Noah was addressing the crowd in their own language. Before Atkin could even start to feel a little left out of the conversation, his wrist device pinged as he started to receive a stream of words. They seemed to have automated a transcript for him, and he was grateful for it as he held up his arm to read at a level where he could still see what was happening on the screen. Greetings to our distinguished guests from around the world and all those who are joining in to watch this momentous occasion. As I'm sure you are all aware, a few months ago a deep space scouting mission happened to stumble upon the extraordinary situation of making contact with extraterrestrial life. Yes, our long-awaited dream of encountering fellow travelers of the stars is no longer a hope that we carry in our hearts, but a reality. We are gathered here today to exchange proper greetings and to discuss what the future may hold between our two species. In just a moment, their chosen representative will step onto this stage and accept questions from our leaders, as well as share what they hope to gain from interacting with us. Now, questions will be asked one at a time, and please do not shout or attempt to overtake someone who is already speaking. I know we have already been through the briefings, but I still think it is prudent to make sure that everyone understands the rules. There will be plenty of time to talk in the future, but for now, let us put our best foot forward and welcome this diplomat from across the stars. As he said this, the assistant that Noah mentioned opened the door and made an inviting gesture toward him. Atkins stood, and as he did, the male assistant went a little stiff. There's that stiffness again. I would really like to know what it means. Questions for another time, perhaps? For now, he made sure he had all his things as he stepped through the door. Noah had stepped away from the podium a little bit and was waiting for him to move into the spotlight. The moment he left the cover of the side area before the stage, he heard an uptick in the noise in the room, though it was kept to a dull roar as the various humans in attendance started to speak amongst themselves. Atkin also heard the telltale signs of human media being present in the room as the clicking and beeping sounds that signaled pictures being taken had increased exponentially. It was difficult to tell how many people were here since he had a bunch of bright lights being cast upon him, but he could see that there were many rows of chairs that were organized in increasingly elevated and wider lines the further back one looked. Once Atkin was close enough, Noah extended a hand to him, offering a very human greeting of a handshake. He had read enough about humanity to understand this, and since it showed that he was willing to adopt aspects of humanity's culture and gave him an excuse to touch, he was not going to complain about the alien form of greeting. Reaching out with only one of his hands, Atkin grasped Noah's offered appendage. Ah, this is nice. I like this greeting. Atkin was trying not to need Noah's hand, as he felt it slightly morph from the pressure of the handshake. The sensation was enough for him to feel the stress and anxiety in his body melt away before he snapped back to attention. He let go of Noah's hand with a little reluctance, but didn't have time to feel any loss as he was then invited to stand at the podium. After moving into position and setting down his portable device down where he could reference his notes, he looked out at the crowd and allowed his eyes to adjust to the lights. Atkin noticed that there were two large screens on either side of the wall behind him. They were blank right now, but it looked like the screen was being linked to the messaging system he had been using to speak with Noah. He confirmed as much as he began typing out his first message and saw alien words appear on the screens beside him. I stand here today with excitement and eagerness in my heart. You have said that humans have been looking for life other than your own out in space, that it was a long-standing dream of your people, and we of the Ursal Collective have also looked to the stars wondering if we might encounter another civilization. Imagine our surprise and joy when you came to us. I would like it to be made clear that we of the Ursal desire nothing more than to see our connection to humanity deepen, becoming a lasting friendship that spans the very cosmos itself. After he had finished typing that, the room was filled with applause as the humans showed support for his mission statement. It didn't sound too dissimilar to the clacking of mandibles that was normal for Ursal to show approval of something, so the familiarity helped him feel prouder about the way he conducted himself. With his opening statement out of the way, he then began to answer some of the questions that were expected of him as a diplomat. Specifics about trade, travel, laws, and the exact span of territory that the Ursal Collective called their own. Very droll subjects that Atkin had to reference his pad multiple times for the details he needed. However, even with such subjects normally being mentally draining, he felt very little in the way of exhaustion as he was surrounded by humans who just made the whole situation more enjoyable by their mere presence. He really wanted to fawn over the older members of their leadership. They looked extra squishy. The questioning was passed to another male, middle-aged by Atkin's best estimate. This male typed out a question that made Atkin's body tense for a second. So, we know that you apparently find humans to be cute. There are a few concerns that we would like to address about that subject. For a moment, Atkin thought that they had somehow found out about his thoughts and the things he wanted to do. He dismissed it as nonsense after a moment, as it was far more likely that the explorers that visited his planet just shared that bit of information with them. He had to clamp down on this at the root. We mean no disrespect. We obviously understand that you are people and have no intention of treating you as lesser. The male who asked the question waved his hand in front of his face in a gesture that Atkin didn't quite understand. Of course, we trust that you will uphold a standard of respect and not force any human to interact should they not desire to. However, that is only a part of what we wish to speak with you about, as there is another issue that we believe should be made clear with your people in the interest of transparency. That felt rather disconcerting to Atkin as his antennae twitched and he shuffled his feet nervously. What could they possibly need to say to me about this that would warrant taking time away from the forum? None of the other diplomats raised any objections either, which further cemented in his mind that this was serious. Now, the male continued. To help you understand exactly what we will be talking about, we have prepared a short slideshow that will appear on the screen to your right. Just know that what you will hear is in no way a reflection on your people. Atkin really didn't like that, but he reserved his judgment until he could hear exactly what they were talking about. He turned to his right so he could see the screen they would be using, and a moment later, an image appeared that made him do a double take for a second. It looked like someone had stuck an Ursal head onto the body of a Trinidite mixed with a Yargum. His confusion was short-lived as the device on his wrist started deciphering the human text being sent to it. This is what is known as a wasp or vespidi in the scientific community. They are a very common form of stinging insect on our planet and can be found just about anywhere that isn't freezing. People are normally averse to them because of the painful stings and bites they can inflict on those who get too close for comfort. Okay. Other than an interesting tidbit about the insectoid life on their planet, he didn't quite understand what the point of showing this was. It seemed, however, that they weren't finished just yet. The slide changed again, and this time it showed a long and many-legged creature from a top-down point of view. The way the chitin was layered was vaguely reminiscent of his own, but other than that he didn't have anything to compare it to. This is a centipede, which falls under the class of arthropod. There are many variations of this insect, but there are many that can bite and sting, some of which have painful venom that can cause great discomfort for those who are on the receiving end. That is unfortunate, I suppose. There was a growing feeling of unease in Atkins' mind that he couldn't quite pin down just yet. Something was gnawing at his mind, telling him that a terrible revelation was just beneath the surface of this seemingly innocuous slideshow. The diplomat moved on as another picture came up, and this one actually made him perk up a little bit. "Oh, that looks like a narrate. It looks a little cute, really." Narrades were a type of tree-dwelling insectoid back on his planet that fed primarily off of tree sap and resin. They are covered in many fine hairs that were sensitive to vibrations and would allow them to detect the approach of any would-be predators. They are also a common enough household pet nowadays, being present throughout much of Ursal history as a beneficial addition to early society for their ability to detect threats. The one he was seeing on the screen, however, was not as fuzzy and evidently not nearly as big if the scale of the objects he was seeing in the background were to be believed. This is known as a spider, or an arachnid. Like the other two insects show, there are many variations of this species with a wide variety of sizes, shapes, and severity of bites. While spiders are useful in that they help mitigate the presence of other, more numerous insects, they can still be considered a nuisance to some, particularly when they have venomous bites. Some species of spiders are so venomous that they could even kill a human despite being many times smaller than us. Atkin looked between the picture of this spider and the diplomat. "I don't get it. Why are they showing me this?" He started trying to piece it together in his head. So far, they have shown 3 different insectoid species, all of which seemingly have at least a minor negative interaction with humans on some level. He tried to think deeper on it. Looking at the picture of the spider that was still up on the screen, there was little he could compare to this creature and the beings of his world other than sharing a similar shape to a narrate. "I guess it has a similar number of limbs as me." Something clicked in his mind at that moment. The wasp had his head, the centipede had a similar body, and the spider had just as many legs as he had limbs. Something dreadful sprang up in his heart as the pieces started falling into place. His antennae started to droop lower and his mandibles hung loosely open. The screen shifted to a new image, but he had stopped paying attention. "This is a stop," Atkins said that out loud, and even though nobody understood the word, the meaning of it apparently went through as the diplomat stopped typing and all eyes fell on him. He didn't want to hear anymore. He didn't need to hear anymore. The dreadful realization had finally fallen upon him as the odd human behavior he had witnessed over the course of his visit here had started to make sense. His mandibles clacked together slowly and nervously. His antennae hung low on his head with shame and disappointment that burrowed a fathomless hole in his heart. He curled his body up a little, making himself appear smaller, less threatening, practically meek as he typed a message to assembled diplomates with measured movements. "I believe I understand what it is you are saying, and thank you for trying to be gentle about it." He hesitated to continue for a moment, as if asking for confirmation would just make what he already knew more real in his mind. "You are saying that humanity finds the sight of an Ursal to be repulsive and terrifying, are you not?" They did not respond immediately as some quiet murmuring was exchanged between those present. That was as good as an answer in his mind, but he still waited to hear it from the humans themselves. Eventually, they seemed to reach a consensus and typed out their answer to his question. "Again, it is not a reflection on your people in any way, as you have shown yourselves to be courteous and well-intentioned. It is simply an instinctual response that has been drilled into us, a matter of survival for many generations. This is not a dismissal or rejection of the Ursal people. We simply wish it to be understood that many humans may need time to adjust to the presence of Ursal. We still desire to have connections with you." Atkin should have felt heartened by that, yet he still felt a deep disappointment. Sure, official connection, trade, and cultural exchanges could happen, but the closeness that most Ursal desired most would likely never come to pass. He couldn't even begin to figure out how he was going to break this news to the rest of his planet. Accepting the humans' measured and diplomatic response to the very question of his existence being an eyesore, he tried to move on and complete his duties as best as he could. Even so, that knowledge was always in the back of his mind, eating away at him as he found his movements to be more wooden, his responses to be less animated, and his overall excitement about being here diminished significantly. It felt like he was up on that stage for an eternity and no time at all simultaneously. There was some small mercy afforded to him when the humans called an end to the forum for the day, allowing him to step out of the spotlight and into obscurity where he would not disturb them. What a cruel joke the universe is playing on us. To discover aliens, adorable aliens, and then have them evolve to fear everything about my species' appearance. Truly, it can be nothing but a cruel joke. He felt defeated as he followed Noah to the room that would be his for the duration of this stay. As he turned to the door with the intent to open it, Noah spoke a word to him to grab his attention before typing on his portable device. "Are you feeling all right? I know that was a lot to drop on you back there." Akin felt gratitude toward the human for being so professional despite how uncomfortable he assumed Noah felt. "Thank you for your concern, but you do not need worry yourself over me or put yourself in an uncomfortable position for my sake." He saw Noah's face scrunch up a little bit, something that would have made him practically squeal with how cute it looked before, but now just made him feel even more disappointed. "Allow me to speak plainly for a moment, Diplomat Akin. Not everyone thinks of the Ursel that way. Sure, many will need time, but there are still many more who want to know about you, about your culture, your lives. Don't lose heart just because of a few bumps on the road." Akin was torn between believing what Noah said and his own pessimism. Noah appeared to pick up on his hesitance and decided to take it a step further. "Do you want a hug?" That made Akin's antennae twitch in surprise as he focused on the bizarre question. "What? A hug? Why?" "To prove to you that there are humans out there that don't care what you look like and just want to get to know you better. So, do you want one? I offer it willingly." Noah spread his arms out in an open invitation. Akin was once more hesitating as he found himself arguing between the part of his mind that really wanted this hug and the part that told him it was unprofessional. He didn't know if he would get another chance like this, at least not for several decades at a minimum. Eventually, the part of him that sought comfort won, and he approached Noah. He was still a little nervous, afraid that the human might lose his nerve and run away at the last second. But Noah held his ground, and once Akin was close enough, the human stepped forward and then embraced him, wrapping his arms as far as he could around his shell. Warm, squishy, fuzzy. All of those positive receptors in his brain were firing off, ridding him on any of his inhibitions as he returned the embrace, wrapping Noah up in a four-armed hug. His antennae started to gently prod over Noah's head, enjoying the fuzzy texture of his hair. The stress and disappointment he had been feeling since the revelation started to melt away, and by the end of it, he felt immensely better. The human gently separated from him again and offered one of their strange yet adorable smiles as he types on his device. "There, feeling better?" "Yes, I do. Thank you, Diplomat Noah. I appreciate the gesture, truly." "No problem at all. Oh, and feel free to just call me Noah outside of a professional setting. I'd like to consider myself your friend." Akin's antennae twitched in a happy manner. A friend, a human friend? This was all he ever wanted to happen on this trip. The only shame was that the rest of his people would likely have to wait a long while before they could find one of their own. "Of course. I accept your friendship and reciprocate it. Glad to hear it." Noah was smiling warmly at him, causing many happy antennae twitches and even a brief clack of his mandibles. Akin saw Noah's eyes widen slightly, and his smile grew a little larger. "Hey, you know what? I think I have something that can help you break the news to your people. Humans may be a little hesitant, but we have other options to fill that gap for you." "Oh, really? Well, I'm interested in seeing this." "Well then, let's get you comfortable in your room, and then I can show you some more animals that I think you will enjoy much more than what you saw during the forum." That sounded like a good plan, and Akin followed Noah into his temporary room. "I wonder what animals he will show me."